You guys, I just love when things come full circle, don't you? And now you've heard it here first, if you haven't already. Push-up bras are back and better than ever. And you guys know that there is nowhere else that I would look to give me the perfect lift and support other than Skims. You guys already know, I've said it before, Skims is my favorite brand, and that is no exaggeration. I could talk about this brand forever and ever. You guys know I love their products. Everything they touch turns to gold, in my opinion. My closet is all Skims, and there's a good reason for it. So here's the deal. Skims has an entire Ultimate Bra collection that will surely cater to your wants and needs. So shop the Skims Ultimate Bra collection and more at skims.com and Skims stores. After you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I am your host of Killer Instinct, and before we get started, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. And if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can always find that over on our Patreon. The link is always in the description box below, and if you're a Spotify listener, you can find those episodes embedded into the feed or at the top of the page. Now, with that all being said, let's jump into the real reason we are here today, which is to unpack this case. As you can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the twisted case of Bonnie Woodward. This is a case where as you're watching and as you're listening, you feel like you might know what's going on, and then there's a twist. You feel like you might be knowing what's happening, and then you don't. This is a case of a lot of twists and turns, and it's one that is absolutely tragic. I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case, and with that being said, let's jump right on into it. Bonnie Woodward was born on June 27th, 1962 in Madison County, Illinois, to her parents, Homer and Bobby Gray. Bonnie grew up in a very big family. She was one of 9 children, and because of this, she grew up learning the importance of family and also had very strong family values. Bonnie herself had 4 children. She had 2 from her first marriage named Joseph and Jennifer, who were in their 20s at the time of her murder. She also had 2 stepchildren named Heather and Aaron. Now, she adopted her 2 stepchildren after her third husband passed away. She legally adopted her stepchildren. Bonnie was very loving. She was very kind. It was said that Bonnie's house was almost the center, the nucleus of the family. This is where all of the nieces and nephews and cousins would go over and hang out and spend family time and have barbecues and have little get-togethers. Bonnie loved being the place where everyone felt comfortable and at home. Now, at the time of Bonnie's murder, she was dating a man named Gary Wilmarth, and Bonnie and Gary had a lot of history. They had been dating on and off for over 7 years leading up to her murder, and at the time, Gary and Bonnie were living together in a house in Alton, Illinois. Alton is a very vibrant and fun town, and like I said, Bonnie and Gary were living together, as well as Bonnie's eldest daughter, Jennifer, and her 2 stepchildren. So this case begins on June 25th of the year 2010. Now, on the specific day, this was a Friday, and 47-year-old Bonnie was working at her job at the Eunice Smith Nursing Home. Bonnie had been working at this specific center for over 25 years. She was extremely passionate about her job. She loved helping people. And Bonnie had a staff meeting on June 25th that was scheduled to be over around 3:00 p.m. So Bonnie's family wasn't expecting her to be home until around 3:30 or 4 p.m. However, when 4 p.m. came and went, Gary, Bonnie's boyfriend, he definitely started to get a little bit concerned. He started calling Bonnie, texting her. Bonnie's eldest daughter, Jennifer, Jennifer was calling and texting, but no one could get a hold of Bonnie. Now, the reason that this was so concerning for everyone who knew Bonnie was because of how regimented and scheduled she was. Even if she was 5 minutes late to something, she was always going to call ahead, whether that be to her family or to her job. And when no one was able to get a hold of her, this is when the fear that something was wrong really started to rise. Now, the following morning, the morning of the 26th, when Bonnie's coworkers arrived to work that day, they realized that Bonnie's truck had been left out in the back parking lot behind the nursing home, meaning she never got into her car. Her car had been left there overnight. Bonnie drove a red truck, and her coworkers noticed that her windows had been kept down overnight. Bonnie leaving her car overnight in general was very out of character for her, especially to leave the windows down and leave it in a way that looked like she was gonna be right back. It just didn't sit right with everyone. This was very out of character for her. So on the morning of the 26th is when Gary officially filed a missing persons report for Bonnie. Now, when police began their investigation, they started out by trying to figure out where Bonnie was last seen, and they were able to narrow down pretty quickly that that was at her job at the Eunice Smith nursing home. Now, unfortunately, where Bonnie's car was parked in that back parking lot, there were no surveillance cameras anywhere, so no one was able to see what Bonnie's exact movements were. However, police were able to get a good look at Bonnie's car itself and see if the car could turn up any potential clues or evidence. Now, like I said, both of the front windows of the car were rolled down. However, inside of the car, there was no sign of a struggle. There was no blood inside of the car. The car looked to be in really great condition. It didn't look like someone had gone into it or ransacked it. However, they still did transport the car to their forensics lot to see if they would be able to dust it for any potential fingerprints. Now, police also did some digging into Bonnie's social media accounts and her bank account. They wanted to see if there was any activity after June 25th. And when they did, they learned that all activity, social media and bank accounts, it all had gone dark after 4 p.m. on June 25th. So right around the time when Bonnie was last seen. And like I said, Bonnie was very regimented and she got paid every single Friday, and she would religiously cash that check every Friday after work at the bank. However, her check from June 25th never got cashed. So all of these little things are starting to add up, and police are really starting to worry about Bonnie's whereabouts. Having an adult missing person, someone who's over 18, we've talked about this before on this podcast, it really is difficult for police to try and figure out, was this foul play, or did this person go off on their own free will? As an adult, you have every right to disappear off the face of the planet if you want to. You have every right to up and leave if you want to and not tell anyone. So they're trying to prove that there was foul play involved, or that there is suspicion that something really wrong was happening. And all of the little things that police are noticing regarding Bonnie is pointing them in that direction. Now, as far as talking to some of Bonnie's family and friends, the first thing that police wanted to do was speak to Gary. Gary was the closest person to Bonnie. He was the significant other. And when police spoke to Bonnie, he did tell them that him and Bonnie had been in a very on and off relationship over the course of 7 years. However, for the past 10 months leading up to her disappearance, they had been together. Gary said that for all things considered, at the time that Bonnie went missing, things were going great in their relationship. And when police asked Gary what he was doing on the afternoon of June 25th, Gary claimed that he spent the majority of that entire day at home in the house that he shared with Bonnie. Now, Bonnie's eldest daughter, Jennifer, like I mentioned, she also lived in the home with her 2 daughters. So it was a full house, and Jennifer was at the house throughout the day as well. And she was able to confirm that Gary was there during the afternoon hours of June 25th. Gary was also given a polygraph test that he did pass. And because there was no evidence pointing to Gary having any involvement, he had a rock solid alibi. He didn't have a motive. He was the one that called in the missing persons report. Police did have to move on in the investigation. Now, at this point, police also spoke with Bonnie's coworkers because, again, the last known place that Bonnie was seen was at her place of work. It was at the Eunice Smith nursing home. And some of Bonnie's coworkers coworkers did have some interesting information to give police. According to Bonnie's coworkers, they claimed that on June 25th, Bonnie's demeanor seemed a little bit different than usual. One of Bonnie's coworkers, named Wanda, recalled how Bonnie was usually very loud, she was outspoken, she was very chatty. However, on June 25th, she seemed quieter, she seemed more subdued, more reserved, so much so that Wanda remembers having an internal dialogue with herself, telling herself that Bonnie just seemed different that day. Wanda said that after the staff meeting, she walked to the back parking lot to get in her own car and drive home. However, that is when she saw a man standing next to Bonnie's truck. She said she didn't recognize the man. She hadn't seen the man before, but she did see Bonnie walk up to the driver's side door of her truck. So Bonnie is now walking up to her own car to the driver's door, almost as if to get into her own car, but that was where the man was standing. Now, according to Wanda, she said that she saw this interaction from afar, and Bonnie did not seem confused. She didn't seem concerned, and because of that, Wanda assumed that Bonnie knew whoever this man was. Wanda described this man as being a white male. He had a medium build, and he was somewhere between 5'8" to 5'9" with salt and pepper hair. And Wanda was actually not the only person who saw this man, because there were multiple other coworkers of Bonnie's who stated that they also saw this interaction and they also saw this man. They claimed that whoever the man was, he was driving a silver Chevy Malibu and that he had parked right next to Bonnie. So whoever was driving this car, they knew what kind of car Bonnie drove because they parked right next to her and got out of their own car and was waiting outside of Bonnie's. Now, in addition to this initial information that police are now getting, they also learned that some of Bonnie's coworkers watched as Bonnie willingly got into this man's car. So it wasn't as if Bonnie stormed off. It wasn't as if Bonnie got into her own vehicle. Bonnie was seen getting into the passenger seat of this man's car, and then the two drove off together, and that is the last time that anyone had seen Bonnie. Now, with this physical description of this man and the vehicle description being this silver Chevy Malibu, police then went back to Bonnie's boyfriend, Gary. They talked to Gary and they also talked to Bonnie's eldest daughter, Jennifer, and they asked them if there was anyone that they knew that matched the physical descriptions that they were looking for, or if they knew anyone that drove a silver Chevy Malibu. And this is when a light bulb went off for both of them immediately. And both Gary and Jennifer claimed that the person that matches the description and has access to a silver Chevy Malibu was Bonnie's ex-boyfriend named Chester McAdams. Both said that Chester matched the physical description and claimed that Chester's dad owned a 2009 Chevy Impala, which looks very similar to a Malibu. Through Gary and Jennifer, police learned that Chester and Bonnie had dated for roughly around a year. So with this information, police obviously now wanted to speak to Chester. Police called in Chester for an interview, and upon doing so, police noticed something immediately that disqualified Chester from being their person of interest, and that was Chester's physical appearance. Yes, he hit around the same height. He was a white male. However, Chester had a beard and a ponytail, and this was not something that was said for the man that went off with Bonnie to have had. Coworkers of Bonnie's said that the man that she went off with was more clean cut, and Chester was not really fitting that bill. Now, police did still speak with Chester regardless, and Chester described his relationship with Bonnie as very turbulent. He said that they had the type of relationship where they would move in together for a few months, they would get into a fight, Bonnie would kick Chester out, and then maybe a week or so later, they would make up, he would move back in, so on and so forth. The cycle repeated itself until they finally called it quits. Now, Chester was very cooperative during the conversation with authorities, and they also brought in Chester's father, who again was the owner of the car. And Chester's father was very quick to say that he would never allow Chester to drive his car. He said that if Chester ever asked, the answer would always be no. And for whatever reason, he did not want his son driving his car, and there was no instance in where he would have been able to do so without his dad's knowledge. Now, police did also speak to Chester's employer, who claimed that Chester was in fact at work at the time time that Bonnie went missing. So because of all of those things combined, Chester was crossed off the potential person of interest list. So after speaking to Chester, police are now back at square one in this investigation, but this is where things take a massive turn that no one could have ever expected. Police learned that Bonnie was not the only person in her family who was actively missing at that time. Police learned that a week prior to Bonnie's disappearance, Bonnie's adopted daughter, Heather, also went missing in East Alton. Now, the Alton Police Department, who was working on Bonnie's case, was not made aware of Heather's disappearance because they were working in two separate departments. Heather's case was being worked by the East Alton Police Department, and Bonnie's case was being worked by the Alton Police Department. Now, I will say how this did not come up in conversation between Gary and Jennifer and the detectives, how no one brought this up is still a question to this day. However, the Alton Police Department was not made aware of Heather's disappearance. Heather Woodward was 17 years old at the time that she went missing, and like I said in the beginning, she was Bonnie's stepdaughter who was adopted after Bonnie's third husband, Heather's dad, passed away. Bonnie adopted Heather when she was only 8 years old, and when learning more about the relationship between Bonnie and Heather, this is when police learned that the relationship between the two had been strained for quite some time. In the weeks leading up to both of their disappearances, Heather had been resisting Bonnie more and more. And from everything that police were able to gather, what Heather was resisting was really just some household rules that Bonnie was trying to implement. And a lot of this came down to chores and rules and things that Bonnie expected of Heather that Heather was very much not a fan of. Now, because of this, Heather had been very vocal to everyone around her, all of the adults in her life. I'm talking teachers, I'm talking people at church, I'm talking really anyone who would listen. Heather was very vocal over the fact that Bonnie was being abusive towards her. Now, I do want to mention that there was never any evidence to ever prove that Bonnie was actually being abusive towards Heather. I don't want to completely say that Heather is lying. However, I also want to make it clear that there were investigations that were looked into Bonnie prior to her disappearance because of Heather's accusations, and all of those investigations came up empty-handed. There was no evidence to support any of these claims that Heather was making. I also want to point out that no one in Bonnie's family ever claimed that these reports were true. None of her other children, the cousins, the nieces, the nephews, no one ever witnessed any of this abuse that Heather claimed that she was enduring. And mind you, a lot of them lived under the same house together. So just keep that in mind as we continue. Now, because Heather and Bonnie were very much clashing leading up to their disappearance, this is when Heather ended up moving in with her teacher. And this is a woman named Christine Scheffel. So Heather moved in with Christine 2 weeks prior to Bonnie's disappearance, but now police obviously learned that Heather is also missing. So police then sit down with Christine Scheffel. Upon doing so, Christine told police that she had actually taught Heather in Heather's Algebra 1 class as a freshman in high school. She said that throughout the school year, Heather was very vocal regarding specific physical abuse that she endured while living with Bonnie. Christine said that she thought that she was doing the right thing by bringing Heather in. However, Bonnie did call Christine multiple times, telling her that Heather has to come back. She was 17 years old. Christine claimed that she thought she was doing the right thing by bringing Heather in. She said that with how vocal Heather had been over the course of the year, she figured that the best thing to do for Heather would be to give her a safe space. However, she learned upon bringing Heather in that Bonnie would be consistently calling her. She was calling her all the time over the course of those 2 weeks, telling her that Heather had to come back. She had to bring Heather home. Heather was only 17 years old. Heather couldn't just automatically go live with her teacher now. She had to come home. And Christine told authorities that she told Heather this. She said that Heather was very upset when Christine told her that she had to go back home. And when Christine came home from work on June 17th, Heather was gone. Christine said that she figured that Heather had just gone home on June 17th. She never called Heather, she never called Bonnie, but she never got a call from them either. So she just figured that Heather had gone back home with Bonnie and the two of them were working through their issues. However, that was not the case. That same day on June 17th, Bonnie ended up calling authorities and reported Heather as a runaway. She was going door to door throughout the neighborhood asking if anyone had seen Heather. However, no one did. So at this point, after gathering all of this information, police now had 3 questions. The first question was, where was Bonnie? The second question, where was Heather? And the third question, are these two disappearances related? Now, this is when things shift in this investigation again. 8 days after Bonnie disappeared, Heather was found. You guys, I just love when things come full circle, don't you? And now you've heard it here first, if you haven't already. Push-up bras are back and better than ever. And you guys know that there is nowhere else that I would look to give me the perfect lift and support other than Skims. You guys already know, I've said it before, Skims is my favorite brand, and that is no exaggeration. I could talk about this brand forever and ever. You guys know I love their products. Everything they touch turns to gold, in my opinion. My closet is all Skims, and there's a good reason for it. So here's the deal. I love a good bra. Some people aren't bra people. I am not one of them. And you want to know why? It is because I have found a bra so comfortable, it feels like I'm wearing nothing. Thank you, Skims. In the past, I've found that the issues with push-up bras is they either feel like they're cutting off my circulation or I feel like I'm spilling out of them, and it's just not cute. Even though I've always wanted to be able to wear ones that fit me right, it just wasn't working, and I really did think I was going to have to write off push-up bras forever. I thought that they weren't for me, but that was until I found the Skims Ultimate Push-Up Bra. The technology in this bra is truly unlike anything I've ever seen or felt before. Instead of packing the bra with too much padding and giving you an unnatural lift and gives that spilling over effect, Skims actually found a way for the bra to mimic the shape of a full bust. Not only does it lift my chest, but it also lifts my confidence tenfold. I look good and I feel good. Trust me on this one, you guys will love it too. And if push-up bras aren't for you, no issue there. Skims has an entire Ultimate Bra collection that will surely cater to your wants and needs. So shop the Skims Ultimate Bra collection and more at skims.com and Skims stores. After you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. On July 3rd, 2010, Heather walked through the doors of the East Alton Public Library, clutching a teddy bear, telling the receptionist that she was Heather Woodward, and she asked the receptionist to call the police as they had been looking for her. Now, immediately, police show up to the library. They transport Heather back to the police station at the Alton County Police Department to ask her a series of questions. Now, one of the things that police first noticed about Heather is that even though she was 17 years old, she actually turned 18 on July 3rd, 2010, which we will get to that in a moment. So she was technically 18 years old at this time. She definitely seemed to mentally be a lot younger than she was. Mentally, she seemed more like a child rather than an 18-year-old. Like I mentioned, she walked into the library, she was clutching a teddy bear. She also spoke in more of a high-pitched, sing-songy, childlike tone. So upon sitting down with detectives, Heather basically confirmed everything that Christine had previously told them. She said she moved into Christine's home after enduring abuse from Bonnie. However, she knew that Bonnie would end up looking for her. She said that when Bonnie called on June 17th and asked for Heather to come back, she knew that she had no other option. Heather said that she knew she either had to leave Christine's home or Bonnie was going to come to Christine's home and physically take her from Christine's back to Bonnie's house. Heather claimed that because of this, she quickly had to come up with a plan on how to stay out of Bonnie's house for those 2 weeks leading up to July 3rd. The reason that July 3rd was such an important date was because July 3rd was Heather's 18th birthday, and Heather knew that at the age of 18, she was no longer legally required to live with Bonnie. She was legally an adult. She could go off and live wherever she wanted. So her plan was to stay missing for 2 weeks leading up to Bonnie's disappearance and then become legally an adult and be able to live wherever she wanted and basically come out of hiding. Now, again, detectives did ask Heather about the alleged abuse that she was enduring at the hands of Bonnie, and Heather really didn't have much to say about it. She, again, just claimed that it was a lot of rules, a lot of chores. The term that Heather actually used was slave labor. That's how she described what Bonnie was asking her to do. She said that Bonnie wanted her to babysit the younger kids for free. It was just a lot of rules that Heather did not like. Now, police also learned, as I mentioned previously, that the Department of Child and Family Services did do an investigation on Bonnie because of these claims. However, the report found that there was no evidence of any abuse taking place in that home. Now, the million-dollar question here for authorities was, where was Heather hiding for these 2 weeks leading up to July 3rd and Bonnie's disappearance? And Heather was very resistant to talk about where she was during those 2 weeks. She did not want to give up any information. She kept saying that she was worried that people would get in trouble, that the people that she was with would get in trouble. However, ultimately, after several hours, Heather finally claimed that she was staying with a family that she met from church. Now, this family is named the Carroll family. Heather claimed that after she ran away, she went to go stay with the Carroll family. Now, the Carroll family consisted of Roger Carroll, Monica Carroll, and their son, Nathan Carroll. Heather claimed that on June 17th, when Bonnie called Christine and asked for Heather to come home, Heather panicked and she reached out to the Carroll family, explaining the situation. She said it was not the first time that she had let them know about what was happening between her and Bonnie, and once they heard what the situation was, Roger Carroll and Monica allowed for Heather to come and live with them for the time being. Heather claimed that Nathan, who was 16 years old, was one of her best friends, and they seemed like a very well-rounded family. Like I said, they met through church, and when police did a little bit of a deeper dive into the Carroll family, they seemed very normal. Monica and Roger were in the medical field. They had no criminal record. Nathan was a very good student. However, because the Carrolls were housing Heather during this time, police could not rule out the possibility that they could somehow be involved in Bonnie's disappearance. Now, police did learn that the Carrolls lived on over 60 acres of land and that Roger Carroll drove a silver Chevy Malibu, which was the same car that Bonnie was last seen getting into outside of her work. Now, because of this, police did tow Roger Carroll's car to their forensics lot to search through it, and while it was being towed, police asked Monica and Roger to come down to the police station just for an interview and to answer some questions. Now, immediately upon sitting down, both Roger and Monica invoked their right to an attorney. However, Heather, on the other hand, did not. Now, upon sitting down with Heather again, Heather informed police that in the days leading up to Bonnie's disappearance, that her and the Carrolls visited Monica's parents' lake house for several days. This was a several-hour drive, and Heather said that she was very excited about it, and it was going to be her, Monica, Roger, and Nathan, and they were going to go and enjoy this lake house together, which they did. However, Heather did point out the fact that Roger and Nathan came home a day early, which was conveniently the same day that Bonnie went missing. Heather claimed that on the early morning hours of June 25th, Nathan and Roger drove back to Alton, leaving Monica and Heather behind. Heather said that there really was no rhyme or reason for this, and that Monica just told Heather that they wanted to get back earlier, and that's what they did. Now, obviously, at this point, when we look at the facts being that Roger drives a silver Chevy Malibu, the fact that Roger and Nathan came home a day earlier than Monica and Heather, and it just so happened to be the day that Bonnie was last seen missing, this raises red flags. This raises questions. However, Heather adamantly denied that Roger would ever do anything to hurt anyone. She claimed that Roger would never hurt a fly, and that all that they were trying trying to do was look after her and care for her. But given the circumstantial evidence that detectives were seeing, they were starting to believe otherwise. Now, even though detectives did not have enough evidence against Monica or Roger to charge them with anything related to Bonnie's disappearance, it was still very early in the investigation, they did have enough evidence to charge them with harboring a runaway, which worked in their favor because when they did this, they were allowed to collect DNA and fingerprints from both Roger and Monica. And they were also able to take Roger's mugshot and take that mugshot and put it in a photo lineup for some of Bonnie's coworkers to see if any of them could identify Roger as being the man that Bonnie got into the car with. However, when police did that, none of Bonnie's coworkers were able to pick out Roger from the lineup. None of them were able to pinpoint him and identify him as being the man that Bonnie was last seen with. Now, months went by in this investigation with no new leads or breaks in the case. However, that all changed in September of 2010, so just a couple months after Bonnie was last seen. In September, detectives received a phone call from their evidence technician who claimed that they were able to detect fingerprints off of Bonnie's truck. Like I mentioned in the very beginning of this investigation, police took Bonnie's car to try and dust it for fingerprints, and the evidence technician was able to do that. And not only that, they were able to get a match for the fingerprints that were found on Bonnie's truck, and the match came back to Roger Carroll. Roger's fingerprints were found on Bonnie's driver's side car door. So this is a huge break in this case. And with this finding, police bring Roger Carroll back in for questioning. And while they were doing this, they simultaneously got a search warrant to search through the Carroll residence and the land that the Carrolls lived on, those 60 acres. Now that search of the house and the land, that came back empty-handed. They also scanned through Roger's car, which also came back with no new findings either, but they did have those fingerprints. Now, upon sitting down with authorities, Roger had no lawyer with him this time. However, he did seem more willing to talk to them. And Roger really brought police back to the very beginning during this conversation. Roger told police that he agreed to let Heather stay with him and his family after she told them about the turbulent home life she was having with Bonnie. Roger said that he had never spoken to Bonnie, he had never been face to face with her, never had a conversation with her, never been around her or her car. He said he had never been around her car, never been in her car, never seen her car, none of it. Now, Roger is going on and on and on. He is telling police all of this, not knowing that the investigators have evidence to prove otherwise, that being the fingerprints on Bonnie's car. Now, police finally bring up this information to him, and when Roger hears this, his immediate response is to claim that he's being framed. He said that there's absolutely no way that that's possible. He denied any sort of reasoning that his fingerprints would be on Bonnie's door, and the interview ended shortly after that. Roger was not willing to talk anymore. Now, because there was not enough physical evidence to follow through with a murder charge or a kidnapping charge, Roger did get charged with obstruction for providing false information regarding the fingerprints, because Roger's fingerprints were on Bonnie's car. You can't make that up. That's obstruction. He lied. And so because of that, he did get charged and served several weeks in jail for that. However, after that, he was released, and this case went cold for a few years. But that all changed in March of 2018 when the Alton police were made aware of a domestic violence incident between Roger and Monica Carroll. Now, after learning about this incident, police did sit down with Monica. They drove out to where she was staying after the incident had occurred to interview her. And up until this point, detectives did not even know that this was the Roger Carroll that was at one point thought to be involved in Bonnie Woodward's case. That connection was not made yet. So they were just sitting down with Monica to learn more about what had occurred. And according to Monica, she claimed that her and Roger were at the tipping point in their marriage. marriage. Their marriage was unraveling. She had informed detectives that Roger had cheated on her multiple times. Their marriage of over 30 years was, like I said, coming to a close. They were sleeping in separate bedrooms, and Monica claimed that she was afraid for her life. She said that on the day of the incident, she gave Roger divorce papers, and she thought that this wouldn't be a big issue, considering the fact that her and Roger had actually talked about divorce leading up to this specific moment. However, it did not go as smoothly as she would have hoped. Monica claimed that when she was getting ready for work, Roger cornered her. After their son left the house, she claimed that Roger grabbed her by her hair and began hitting her over the head with a taser gun. Monica said that during the struggle, she was able to get the taser gun away from Roger, throw it into the next room, and tried to de-escalate the situation. She said luckily she was able to talk Roger down. She told Roger that he was a good dad and he just wasn't the man that she married, and it doesn't make him a bad person. It just means that they aren't the right fit for each other in a marriage. And Roger seemed to have agreed. He told Monica that he was a monster and he had the devil living inside of him. Now, luckily, after this conversation, after it was able to be de-escalated, Roger let Monica get ready for work. And when she did, afterwards, she immediately got in her car, sped off, and called authorities. Monica did warn authorities that she believed that Roger could be suicidal. And when detectives arrived at the Carroll home, they did find Roger in the woods. He was laying down, and they discovered needles in a vial of insulin in his pocket and learned that Roger had attempted to take his own life. Now, Roger at that point was still alive, and so authorities were able to call an ambulance, paramedics. He was rushed to the hospital, and he survived. Now, when the Alton detectives learned that this incident involved the Roger Carroll that was presumed to be involved in the Bonnie Woodward case, they immediately wanted to sit down and speak with Monica again. They figured now it was possible that she wouldn't have such a strong loyalty to Roger, maybe because she felt that the marriage was coming to an end and everything that had occurred in this domestic violence incident. It would be helpful to speak to her again. Maybe she would not cover for Roger as much as she once was, and it could be helpful in Bonnie's investigation, and Monica agreed to do so. Now, upon sitting down with detectives, Monica stated that in the days leading up to Bonnie's disappearance, Roger grew more and more interested in Bonnie. He started asking Heather questions about Bonnie's schedule, what kind of car she drove, when she usually would go to work, when she would leave. Really, since Heather moved in with them for those days leading up to Bonnie's disappearance, his interest very much piqued in Bonnie. Monica claimed that she thought that it was odd, but when he stopped talking about it after Bonnie went missing, she just forgot about it. So in the days leading up, Roger was talking about Bonnie, talking about Bonnie, talking about Bonnie. Then Bonnie goes missing. Roger stops talking about Bonnie. She just kind of figured that the conversation had come to an end and he wasn't curious anymore. She didn't seem to put two and two together in that way. Now, Monica did claim that she remembered an unsettling conversation that she had with Roger after Bonnie disappeared. It was during an argument that Roger and Monica had that Roger told Monica, "I have killed for you." That is what she claimed he said. "I have killed for you." Monica said that after this conversation, she went to talk to Nathan, her son, and repeated what Roger had said, but Nathan told Monica to never say that again. He begged his mom to never repeat those words. Now, at this point, police were confident, considering that Heather and Monica were at her parents' lake house when Bonnie went missing, that Monica was not involved in Bonnie's disappearance. Monica claimed that she had no idea what Roger did, what he did to Bonnie, or what he meant by "I have killed for you," or what incident he could have been alluding to. So at this point, police wanted to talk to who they believe could be the only other person that could give them some new information, and that was Nathan, Roger and Monica's son. Now, at the time that Bonnie went missing, Nathan was 16 years old, but now at this point, he was 24 years old. Now, in exchange for a full conversation, a full confession, a full honest laying everything out on the table with authorities, Nathan was granted full immunity. So if he talked, no matter what he said, he got full immunity. And this is when Nathan started to open up more. Nathan confessed to authorities that in the days leading up to Bonnie's disappearance, he and his parents, along with Heather, were at his grandparents' lake house. He claimed that on June 24th, so the night before Bonnie's disappearance, Roger came to him and told him that the two were going to be leaving early the next morning. Nathan wasn't expecting this, but he really didn't question it, and the two left the next day. The next morning when they drove back to Alton together, Nathan remembers driving by the Eunice Smith nursing home, which is where Bonnie worked, and Roger said, "Good, she's there." Nathan said he didn't really know what his dad was referring to or who he was talking about, but he remembers his dad saying that. After Nathan and Roger got home, Nathan said that his dad showered, shaved, and clipped his fingernails. He said that he watched as his dad grabbed a handgun and walked out the door. Now, as Roger was leaving, he told Nathan to set up a tent in the backyard, which Nathan did. Nathan said that shortly after that, he went back inside, he had some lunch, he heard his dad return back home, and shortly after that is when he heard 8 or 9 gunshots go off. Nathan said he walked out to the driveway and saw Bonnie's body laying on the ground. Afterwards, Nathan said that he assisted his dad in creating a massive fire pit. So he made a giant fire pit in the backyard, and once that fire pit was big enough, Nathan watched as Roger took a tractor, loaded Bonnie's body into the tractor, and placed Bonnie's body into the fire pit and watched her burn in the fire. Nathan said that the fire had to be refreshed every several hours because of the strength of the fire and how big the fire was, and Nathan assisted his dad in doing so. Now, after the burn pit was put out, Nathan said that Roger took the remainder of the ashes that were left and poured it into the creek, which ran alongside the house. Now, along with this confession, Nathan also walked authorities through the property and pointed out areas where all of this took place. He pointed out where the burn pit was. He pointed out where Roger shot Bonnie. He pointed out where Roger dumped the ashes into. He really walked police through from start to finish that entire afternoon. Now, upon searching these areas, investigators were able to collect 27 pieces of bone fragments that they sent to the forensic lab to see if they could connect those bone fragments to Bonnie Woodward. There were 27 pieces of bone fragments, and they wanted to see if they could connect them. Now, moving forward, after speaking to Nathan, police felt confident enough with the information that they had to charge Roger with first-degree murder. Now, Roger pled not guilty to these charges, and going into the trial, the prosecution was definitely facing an uphill battle. They didn't have Bonnie's body. They didn't really have a motive for why Roger would want to kill Bonnie, so this was going to be tough, but the prosecution was ready. One of the things that the prosecution was able to do that worked in their favor was get Bonnie declared officially deceased. Now, during the trial, Nathan also took the stand. It was a part of his deal, and he testified against his father, and he told the jury everything I just told you. Alongside of this, the prosecution also presented the evidence of the 27 pieces of bone fragments found on the Carroll property, and what was shocking here is that the results came back as these bone fragments were not a match to Bonnie Woodward. They weren't a match to Bonnie. However, it was confirmed that these bone fragments were human remains. And who those remains belong to is still a question that goes unanswered to this day. Another big piece of information provided by the prosecution had to do with a sassafras tree in the Carroll's yard. Now, this specific tree was close to where Nathan claimed that the burn pit was that his father had lit on the afternoon of Bonnie's murder. And in order to prove this, investigators did cut down this specific tree. They cut out bits and pieces of it, and they sent it off to a botanist botanist, and this botanist was able to confirm that the tree did in fact have fire damage that would significantly age it, and they were also able to confirm that the damage would have taken place in the spring or summer of 2010 based off of the damage that it had caused. I'm shocked that a botanist is able to narrow it down to that specific of a time frame, but this really helped the prosecution in their case because that is right when Bonnie went missing. Now, Heather also testified and told the jury about Roger's interest into Bonnie's schedule and that she was the one that told Roger about the relationship between her and Bonnie. However, Heather continuously said that she never told Roger any of this in the hopes that he would ever hurt Bonnie. She never thought that Roger would hurt Bonnie. She never thought that anything bad was going to happen to Bonnie. And even though her and Bonnie definitely butt heads, she never wanted Bonnie to get hurt. Now, the defense, on the other hand, they actually pointed all of this on Nathan. They pointed the finger at Nathan from the get-go. They claimed that Nathan was the one who killed Bonnie, and they said that Roger had only been trying to cover for his son over these years. However, the jury did not buy this. They did not buy this one bit. After deliberations, Roger Carroll was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Bonnie Woodward. Roger was sentenced to 40 years plus 25 years for Bonnie's murder, and during the sentencing, Roger said that he was not going to apologize because he did not do anything wrong. So he was still denying the whole thing, any involvement, any and all involvement. To this day, he denies. And that, you guys, is the case of Bonnie Woodward. What I think that we have to remember in this case is that this does not seem like this was Roger's first time doing this. It does not seem that this was Roger's first kill. Clearly, the 27 pieces of bone fragments help support that theory. Again, this is all allegedly. We have no actual factual evidence to prove that. However, allegedly, it appears as if this is not Roger's first rodeo. And I'm very curious to hear what you guys say about this. I'm very curious to hear if you think that Monica had knowledge of this. Let me know what you think. Personally, what I believe to have happened is Roger drove over to Bonnie's place of work. Bonnie, who is still searching for Heather, not knowing where Heather was, sees Roger. Roger tells Bonnie that he can take her to where Heather is. Heather gets in the car with Roger because she's familiar enough with him because they go to the same church. They then go to Roger's home. Bonnie gets out of the car and is unfortunately murdered instead. That is what I believe to have happened in this case, but let me know what you think. But with that being said, you guys, that's going to be all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name's Savannah. I'm your host. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. All links to everything, including Patreon, is always in the description box below, like I mentioned in the beginning. I will be back next week with a brand new one, and until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.